I know we've got some folks on today that I don't think were on yesterday. And so I'll do another real quick reintroduction of myself. But I'm Gary Wood, and I coordinate the implementation of the cohesive wildfire strategy in the 13 southeastern states. And we serve as the southeastern region for the Wildland Fire Leadership Council. That's made up of a large group of federal agencies involved in land management, USDA Forest Service, Department of Interior, a lot of other federal agencies, as well as state representation, even local representation with counties and cities, and tribal representations, and a lot of national, non-governmental organizations. But when we look at the Southeast as a whole, we've had the opportunity to have partnerships for a long, long time, and we've always worked very well hand in hand with one another. I know yesterday when Kathy did her presentation was talking about, these are my people, these are the folks that I work with, and so I'm going to help them. I'm going to do what I can to help them. And we've had that spirit here in the Southeast for a long time. I know, John mentioned it earlier about a lot of the timber companies having their own fire control programs. I can remember when I started with North Carolina Forest Service back in the mid 80s that it was nothing in some of our districts to be able to have, 15 or 20 extra dozer units, fire plow units available that belonged to those timber companies, and they would go on land that wasn't theirs and help fight fire. And they trained right alongside with us, So our partnerships in the Southeast have been going on a long time. And, I oftentimes say that the cohesive strategy was kind of built around the way that we've just always done business here in the Southeast. But moving along, most people say, oh, we don't have fires in the Southeast. If you go out and ask the general public, they're going to tell you all the fires occur in California. Well, if you look at the graph on the left here, what this shows you is the number of fires by geographic area. And we're the one that's listed SA on here for Southern area. And it shows that we had, excuse me, and this is 2019 data. I couldn't access the 2020, it wasn't released yet. But in 2019, we had 46% of the wildfire ignitions that occurred in the United States. And, so we have, and this happens almost yearly that you see this, that we have pretty close to, or maybe sometimes a little more than 50% of the ignitions nationwide. When you look over on the right, it looks at the number of acres burned. And of course, Alaska, the AK, that's understandable because they just have large fires and limited access to some of the areas up there, and some of the areas they can just let burn, where we can't do that necessarily here in the Southeast. But looking here at our southern area, at 11% of the acres that burned across the United States occurred in the southern area in 2019. So on an average, we usually average somewhere, looking at this 10-year average number, we've averaged a little over 32,000 fires each year, burning about 1.3 million acres. And this information has come from the National Interagency Fire Center. One of the things that we're different from here in the Southeast also is that we have a year-round growing season. John mentioned that this morning, that if you don't maintain those fuel breaks, they grow up pretty quick. But we also have fires that occur every month out of the year, and we don't get the heavy snowpacks like they do in the West that limits their fires that occur. Of course, when we look at prescribed burning, a lot of discussion around it yesterday. And the southern area here, you see, and these again 2019 numbers, that we actually had 176,382 prescribed fire projects that occurred in the southern area. And these numbers contain, inclusive of state, federal, uh, even private landowners that have reported in that they've done burn projects, non-governmental organizations, and tribal entities. So this is trying to capture, most all of that information. And then when you look over, on the right, you can see where we just did a tremendous amount of acres. And looking back, I did go in yesterday and looked, and year to date to yesterday, so far this year, just in our region, we've had almost 95,000 burns for 4.5 million acres. And I know the U.S. Forest Service alone in the southern area burned has gone over 1 million acres this year, which hasn't happened in the past few years for wet weather. And of course, COVID had an impact on being able to burn last year as well. So a little overview of the South. And I'm gonna kind of paint the picture here for you on the fire situation, and then we're going to talk about how you can apply a cohesive strategy as a conservation district locally. But when we look at the Southeast, we've got a very large and expanding wildland urban interface problem. And this is where you've got homes that are either intermingled or abruptly join wildland fuels, undeveloped areas, etc. And you'll hear it referred to as WUI, and you'll hear more about that later as we go on. But in the Southeast, some of the fastest growing counties in the United States are in the Southeast. And, you don't hear folks talking about retiring and moving up north. Everybody wants to come to the South or the West. And so we continue to grow. A large amount of seasonal vacation homes, where people have second homes in areas, particularly up in the Appalachians and in some of the coastal areas where people have second homes for vacation. And, everybody thinks here again about West, West, West. Well, Texas, North Carolina, and Florida rank second, third, and fourth behind California with the most number of houses in the wildland urban interface. And surprise, surprise, the fifth one is actually the state of Pennsylvania. So it's not always, West, West, West. And in the Southeast, we've got, states that rank in the top 5 for the number of acres in wildland urban interface. So we've got a very fragmented landscape, a lot of this development and growth with people moving in, they're bringing in invasive species when they start planting ornamentals and stuff around their homes. And we know what problems they cause. And then as we continue to try to do prescribed burns, managing the smoke becomes more and more of a challenge, as well as, the impacts you can have from smoke from wildland fires as well. So a very fragmented landscape that continues to get fragmented even more. And most of our forest ownership in the Southeast actually is on privately owned land. It's not the large land holdings like you see out in the West. So yesterday, when I talked about the cohesive strategy and talked about the different phases of risk, I mentioned those cross value actions for the greatest impact. And if you take a look here, I highlighted this one in particular because it talks about education and incentive programs to encourage new and non-traditional landowners to get them to manage their lands to contribute to resiliency, while providing forest products and expanding our forest markets. And I know Ann's sitting there just waiting to ask me a question.
I am. The first time I heard you talk about non-traditional private landowners, I was like, what is that? What are you referring to? So I'm asking the question again.
and not being offensive here, but just in my kind of simple terms, I told Ann when she asked me that question, I said, well, simply put, it's where city slickers get them a mini farm and they move to the country. And, but, aside from that, you do have a lot of older folks who are passing on, and they have children that are now becoming those forest landowners. And depending on how involved those kids were, in the operations of managing their family forest land when their parents were living, it depends on their viewpoints for managing and taking care of that land itself. So, you know,
Mm.
it's new ownerships is people that have not necessarily owned forest land before. And you do see a lot of folks going in and buying, you know, so-called, you know, mini farms, and even some of your larger timber companies with real estate holdings, you know, are selling off 10, 15, 20 acre lots that can't be subdivided. And people buy a 25, 30-year-old pine plantation uh, tract, and now they've got a home and they've got a little wood lot. So trying to help those folks was one of the things identified, you know, that we could try to work on. And of course, you know, down at the bottom, I didn't highlight this one, but it talks again about controlling those invasive species that alter our fire behavior, our fire regimes, and alter our ecosystems. I don't know why my arrow thing doesn't work here. Okay, and then we talked about critical barriers or barriers and critical success factors. You know, one of the things that I look at here is if we can create incentives and where we've got disincentives, get rid of those to increase fuels management on private land. And then, you know, here's a biggie. You know, you folks in the conservation districts or the local folks that live there, you see the impacts of what growth management, land development is taking place, and how zoning laws can impact things. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of our farmland is having to be sold off so people can pay taxes for what land they can continue to hang on to because of so much urban sprawl and growth and development. So anything that you can do, you know, working with your local officials and getting into their ear and sharing your comments on that is always a plus. And then we identify those strategic opportunities. And this goes back again to the first one, expanding outreach and education to those new landowners that are new to the region, uh, as well as those new non-traditional private forest landowners, and just stress the importance of being ready in case a wildfire happens. Uh, you know, a lot of times I've heard in my career people say, "Oh, well, I'm not worried if the home burns. It got insurance; they'll build it back." You know, or I've really been hit, you know, before when we're fighting fire in one of these areas where you've got a lot of those seasonal homes at, and somebody's like, "Oh, well, if this house burns, I've got another one I can go to." But we really need to stress to people that they need to take ownership. You know, they're the ones that's creating this problem. They're the ones that need to try to help be a solution to the problem and lessen that wildfire risk. And then, as we've talked about so much, just, you know, more prescribed burning on larger landscapes, so we can definitely make sure we maintain and keep our ecosystems functioning and working like they should. So getting to the meat of it, you know, how can a conservation district participate in implementing the cohesive strategy? You know, we'll take a look at each one of the individual goals of cohesive strategy and look at how this can be applied on the ground and some of the things that can be done. You know, when we look at resilient landscapes, we've talked about we've got to be able to do more at a larger scale and a larger pace. You know, promoting and pushing prescribed burning is a big thing that can be done from the conservation districts, encouraging people to increase and do more of it. Uh, you know, prescribed burning is going to improve the watershed performance because it allows for a recharge of those systems faster. Groundwater can penetrate and get back into the aquifers faster, and reducing the fuel buildup to lessen that fire risk. You know, work with your state forestry agency counterparts. Most of you are already doing that. One of the big things, and we talked about it yesterday, was forming these prescribed burn associations and getting individuals interested in burning their land and forming a group. I know a lot of it's been done out in Keith's area. John Weir's been a big proponent of it and done a lot of it in Oklahoma. And more and more of our states, aside from their prescribed fire councils, are having individuals prescribed burn associations developed that mostly like at a county level, which would fit right in with the conservation district footprint. Another thing would be is if you could purchase and fund prescribed fire trailers, small enclosed trailers that contain drip torches, maybe some of these fold up portable smoke on the road ahead signs in case smoke gets on the road. But some of the hand tools, leaf blowers that work well in hardwood fuels, creating fuel breaks, fire rakes, shovels, etc. The portable backpack pumps, and rent those out. You could generate a little bit of income that way, or just have one person that maintains it so that one person knows where it's at and they know what's supposed to be on it. Keep it inventoried and keep it stocked and keep it moving. And then hosting certified prescribed burn manager courses. Most of your state agencies or have a certified burn manager course that they offer, and work with your state forestry agency to try to get one of those courses established and set up so that you can get more people certified and help lessen some of that liability on them. Got trigger happy here. And then looking at the second goal, the fire adapted communities, I'm not going to dig into this a whole lot because I know Megan and Frank are going to talk about this quite a bit. Faith mentioned the chippers. That would be a great idea. If y'all had a chipper that you could rent out so that folks could use it to chip up the fuel where they do fuel reduction around their homes and removing the stuff. We did this with some folks under the Firewise program in North Carolina when I worked here, and they had a local place there that they could stockpile the chips. The only thing was they could go back and get them later for mulch, but they couldn't put them nowhere within about 30 feet of their house, for what they chipped up. So doing that, trying to encourage folks to, limit the amount of fuel around their homes. Get involved with some of the fire assessments. Some programs are out there that can teach you how to go in and assess the homes and rank them as far as their risk of wildfire. And then, I've got here, this kind of goes in goal 2 and 3, but partner with your local fire departments. Help fund dry hydrant installation so they can access water easily from ponds or water sources. One of the things that I've seen done in some of our mountain communities where it's hard to have water on top of a mountain, they will install cisterns there. A lot of times get 2 or 3 septic tanks, plumb them together, and then have a standpipe the fire department can connect to. That would be a good way to help out as well. I'm not going to go into those mitigation programs because they're going to be covered later in more detail. But people say, what is my risk? How am I at risk? You can go on the South RAP, which is the Southern Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, put your address in, and it will actually take you down at your kind of street level. It will allow you to look and see what your risk is to wildfire. It can give you opportunity to get a little bit of a report that talks about what the risk is there. And that information can help educate folks that may think, oh, fire's not a problem. I don't have an issue here. But it's got a couple of things that can put on there to show you your risk index, as well as show some of the surface fuels that are there and other stuff that shows and talks about spread rates, etc. 2 types of viewers, just a public viewer that you can go in and do. Anybody can do it, any homeowner, but then also has a professional viewer that you can ask permission to get into, and that'll let you go in and download GIS layers, etc., that you can utilize. And then looking around goal 3 of cohesive strategy, getting involved and talk about, the community planning aspect, try to be a voice and a piece in that. As we can continue to see more urban sprawl, this is going to impact our rural areas, and we need to be able to make sure that we're doing smart growth, smart planning, not only just where we're building and how, but, talk about the construction materials that are utilized. some of that information you'll hear more about and is available through those national mitigation programs that we highlighted yesterday that we'll hear later on in the program today. Uh, you know, again, facilitating those partnerships with your local fire departments, looking at the dry hydrant installation, cisterns, etc. One of the biggest things and one of the biggest issues we're seeing, not only across the Southeast, but also across the country, is we don't have people volunteering like we used to. And I think it was John yesterday was talking about being involved with his fire department. You know, if you can get involved with some of the youth that you work with and encourage those youth to think about volunteering in their local fire department, we really need to get more people involved. We're seeing a huge reduction in fire department membership in our volunteer departments across the Southeast. And there's several states that are working and promoting, uh, recruitment campaigns. There's workshops being done on recruitment and retention of volunteers. But a big thing if we could get folks more involved. I spent over 25 years as a volunteer firefighter, and as being a person that worked 100 counties in a state, it was hard to keep training hours up. And, you have a son that plays baseball or a son involved in high school athletics or a daughter, that's involved in Girl Scouts or in dance or something. Uh, you've got to really work at it to devote that time to it. And that's where we need to encourage more volunteerism, across the country. We've got a generation that's doesn't always think about others, but think about themselves first. And we need to try to help turn some of those around. So if you're working with your local FFA units in the schools and stuff, a good opportunity to share and try to promote that to the kids. And then when we look at, the other things that are out there, kind of out and aside from necessarily those three goals, but they actually impact and have the influence over those three goals of cohesive strategy. We've talked about invasive species, but looking at that post-hurricane stuff, post-tornado, post-ice storms, like the video footage we saw yesterday, outreach and education, sharing information, guiding those property owners to what they could do to try to start that recovery process in their forest lands. The wildfire prevention messaging during periods of time of high fire occurrence or the risk of high fire occurrence, working with your local forestry folks there, whether they be state or federal, and your local fire department folks to try to help promote and get wildfire prevention messaging out. Smoke ready community education. Uh, if we have wildfires that are burning for long duration, causing smoke impacts on the communities, there's a lot of information out there you can help share from the CDC website. And I'll try to put a link in the chat later today that's got a lot of good points about how to make clean air rooms in your house with a box fan with a HEPA filter taped on the back of it. And then you're going to hear Frank talk about the FarmWise program he's got. And for Keith and the folks over in the Plains area, I know that Texas, a gentleman there over in West Texas, has started a program where he's done like a ranch-wise program. But, fire safety and mitigation on the farm and the ranch. Think about those areas where we've had large fires that burned across those grasslands, rangelands, that burnt cattle, homes, towns, fencing, etc. Try to help promote fire education there. And then wrapping up here with a little bit of a tool that you can use. Y'all may not necessarily want to know about fire weather all the time, but this is a great tool that we've got. It's the Fire Weather Intelligence portal. It started in North Carolina, but we got grants and expanded across the Southeast. And if you look over on the lower left, hopefully it'll show up, but you can put in up to 4 parameters, and it lets you look at soil moisture, keeps from drought indices, air temperature, wind speed, wind gust, relative humidity, a whole lot of information you can get at kind of a one-stop shop there right locally, right down to your county level. And then lastly, if you really want to learn more about cohesive strategy, we're hosting our 4th National Cohesive Strategy Workshop in Asheville, North Carolina, October 4th through 8th. Right now, looking like it's going to be both an in-person and part virtual, so it'll be a hybrid conference or a hybrid workshop. I've got the link on there, but you can go to International Association of Wildland Fires website, look under conferences, and look for cohesive strategy workshop. And I encourage you to try to attend if you can. My contact information is there, and then the link for that weather portal as well. Or you can just go in and Google Fire Intelligence Portal, and it'll put it up for you. But, you know, it's all about collaboration. It's all about all hands, all lands. You know, Ann mentioned trying to work smarter instead of working harder. When we work closer together, we build those relationships. It just helps us all pull through things a lot better when you've established those relationships and have those collaborative partnerships well in advance before, whether it's a fire, a flood, whatever type of event. It makes it easier to get through it. And I'll be glad to take questions now, and I think we've got a few minutes left.
All right, sounds good. Thank you very much, Gary. Good presentation and a lot of information to absorb in a short amount of time. So I did put in southernwildfirerisk.com. I didn't have, the link to your fire weather portal.
I'll put it in chat if you want it. It's down here at the bottom on this slide.
Okay, that would be helpful to put that in the chat, then folks can link to it.
I will
later. Thanks, Gary.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I thank you, Madison County, for your comment about volunteer wildland firefighting is a good opportunity as well. And I have to say, it really is. And there is a huge need for more volunteers all across the country. So it is a great opportunity for training and getting to know the people that you're going to be fighting fire with or involved in some other type of future disaster event. So any questions for Gary? Not seeing any. One thing that I did want to mention, Gary, did you have like a training site? Is there I know FEMA has a lot of free wildland firefighting training available, but is there one that you guys link to specifically for the Southeast folks? Goes to everybody? You're on mute.
Are you talking about like the basic wildland fire information type stuff?
Yes.
No, not really. We don't have one that we're utilizing, but I'll try to do some searching while we're on the rest of the conference, and if I can find something, I'll put it in the chat. But
okay,
you know, most of it starts with those local forestry folks. And as far as like, you know, from a prescribed burn standpoint, getting involved with those prescribed burn associations, prescribed fire councils, you could get some training opportunities there. And then also most of those certified prescribed burn manager courses will give you some of those basic weather informations that you need in helping develop and move that. But one thing I did fail to mention, you know, just like when I believe it was Charles was talking about bringing folks out to his place, you know, have some demonstration sites, whether it be a fuel reduction project around a home that you could take folks out to and show them, as well as demonstration sites on prescribed burning, because there's nothing like people seeing it. When you say fire, people think you're thinking bad, you know, and promoting that good fires is positive. You know, just quick war story. We had a community that was gated near Fort Bragg in North Carolina, retirees golf course. Zero burning could be done inside that gated community. That was all in it was in longleaf pine ecosystem. And they had been threatened by fire. They had a fire that ran right up to the edge of the community. We went and talked to them about trying to do prescribed burning in there, and they just, you know, didn't want to hear it. So we talked them into letting us burn 1 acre right around their clubhouse, which was like the center of the community for everybody. So we went in and did a prescribed burn. Well, after we burned it, they were able to see, you know, all these wildflowers that were popping up in that understory that they'd never seen before, you know, so they were just like, wow, this is great. And then they had community owned property in the community that they changed their covenant codes restrictions, let us go in and start burning there. And I mean, it was like, it got to be like a block party. When we told them we were going to go prescribe burn, people had their baskets with their wine and cheese and their lawn chairs sitting out on the edge of the property watching us do prescribed burns. So
Sign me up.
show them, you got to show them sometimes to make believers out of them. But, you know, you folks, people are going to listen to you because you're local, you're there. You know, you're not somebody from off, as they say in the South, or from somewhere else. So good opportunities.
That's good. All right. Thank you so much, Gary. Keith, thank you so much for texting me that. There are some states that do, you know, belong, that where you, when you belong to one of those prescribed burn associations, it provides you with additional protections from, you know, with liability. And I'm certainly no expert on that, but I would like to be sure to provide you with more information on that. And Gary, I'm not sure if you have some of that information, or I could talk with Mark Melvin with Prescribed Fire Councils, probably get me some of that, and I'll share that with the folks on the summit today.
Yeah, I can try to help you pull some of that together. And Keith is right. It varies by state. It varies the amount of liability protection. Some of the states now are even getting gross negligence written in there, which is a great thing. But it will help lessen that liability, and I'll try to help you get some of that information that we can share out with the group.
Okay, that sounds great.
In the next
Gary,
couple of weeks.
thank you, Keith, for mentioning that. That's good. All right. Not seeing any other questions in chat or on. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll make sure that the PowerPoint is available to folks on the NACD website, along with the recording for today's session.